Ms. Stabile, Director of HARBEL in Baltimore City, speaks about the positive aspects of clinical trials network studies conducted at her site. She explains how challenging it can be at times when researchers and clinicians might have different objectives and different language, but the overarching common goal to improve substance use disorder treatment makes such collaboration worth the effort.
It starts to answer some of those questions that we might come up with based on our observation and our experience. But there's some other questions that staff tend to ask when you start talking about research, and let's bring research into the program, or let's bring researchers into the program. Usually the first one is, who are these researchers and why do they care about what we do? Okay, we live in different worlds. Researchers, clinicians, not always sure about each other, so that's usually the first question. And you know, that's linked to, will these researchers understand what it's like in the real world outside of academia? So most of my clinicians read some research when they were going to school, and some of it made sense, and some of it didn't make sense. Some of it they use in what they do, some of it they can't imagine that anybody ever uses anywhere. So they want to know that, you know, the research that's being presented makes sense, that it's not just something that happens in academia. And often if they're talking about research, is there anything here that I can really use to help my clients? Because really, if I'm a clinician, if I'm a program director, is there anything about this that's useful? If it's just really interesting, that's great. Maybe I want to read about it on Friday night. But if it's not interesting, beyond interesting, and it's not something that's helpful to my clients, it's not going to be meaningful. So those are some of the things that I think clinicians ask. Researchers, on the other hand, when they show up, and you want to talk about research, you tend to ask some other questions. Where's the data? Toby earlier, that was for her. Where is the data? And it's usually followed quickly by, why don't they collect more data? Now, I will tell you that as a program director, I've learned to go, and what do you do with all the other data that I collect that I'm required to turn into the state, the city, and various other sources? That is sometimes my answer. But, you know, often people are looking at data. Where is the data? Why don't they collect the data? And how can you say this works if you don't have any data? You're a nice person, that's great, you're good mission-driven, but how do you know it works? So we don't always ask exactly the same questions of each other when we're interacting between programs and communication. So I really believe that the first step is communication. It's kind of like your basic. We do have different languages. Since being involved in the clinical trials network, I've learned a whole new set of alphabet abbreviations, things I never knew, because it's a different language. Okay, and I've had to learn that language. I assure you that when they've pulled my charts and tried to extract data from them, they've learned a whole new set of abbreviations as well. We don't always have the same language. And we have different skill sets. You know, I accept that researchers have skill sets in research that I don't have, probably won't ever necessarily have, but I have some skills about working with people in my hallway who are substance abusing and high right now that they just walked in on the street, or managing a program, or coping with changes in the publicly funded system that they may not have. So they can be complementary. You know, we just have to understand that it's not better or worse, but that it is different. And just like when you're working with a client or you're working with something that's different, you have to figure out the language, the culture, the experience. So to bring research into a program, you have to acknowledge that there are differences, and you have to figure out how you're going to work with those things. Okay? And then you do want to look for common ground. I think that's the important next step. First, you actually have to kind of talk to each other, and then you're looking for common ground between the research and between the program. Okay, in my program, you know, we're looking for, you know, what are the problems that the program and its staff has in day-to-day work. NIDA says, what keeps your executive director up at night? What keeps your counselors up at night? But, you know, what are the things that we worry about? What are the things that as staff you care about? You care about clients' attendance rates. You care about clients who achieve or don't achieve abstinence while in treatment. You probably make a much longer list than that, but those are two things that universally counselors tend to care about. Researchers care about that too, but again, the language and culture is sometimes a little bit different. So the researcher does want to know what's of enough interest to be published. You know, I see some pro bono clients in my agency, but only after we've paid the rent. So, you know, researchers can do research for the sake of research, but it does actually usually have to be connected to their academic institution or financial. You know, has to be somebody who wants to read it when they're done. So, you know, they might frame it differently, but they're interested in things like, how do you show an increase in abstinence if certain services are delivered? That might be the research question. That really fits very well with what I want to know, which is how do you improve attendance in our clinic? So sometimes you just have to negotiate the language differences or the perspective differences. I found a quote that I like, and I forgot who did it, so I put it in quotes, but I didn't put it up there. We use different transportation systems to get to the same place. We'd all like clients who show up regularly, who achieve abstinence, who become employed, who stay out of the criminal justice system. Generally, those are all good things, no matter what perspective you're looking at it from. But how you're going to get there, how you're going to collect it, how you're going to show it is going to be different. No system exists that's beneficial to treatment programs, clinicians, patients, and provides ongoing, timely, and useful information to policymakers and researchers. I think that's true, you know, but I also think that, and it probably never will exist in a perfect way or a perfect world, because, you know, we're a very diverse nation doing very diverse things. But on the other hand, we can get closer to that if we collaborate, and I think that it is about programs, clinicians, patients, policymakers, researchers. You know, if we don't talk to each other, then the research isn't something we use in our program. And if we don't have data, the policymakers don't fund us. So all those things need to go together. The more that we can work together between programs, clinicians on the ground, research, I think we get better at creating a better system. So if we're going to work together, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the more practical parts of collaboration and bringing research into a program. I believe that most programs, most people in this field are mission driven. You know, we want the people to serve have good outcomes. I've been in this field for a long time. You know, count some clinicians who are better than other clinicians, but basically, I believe that people are in this field because they want good outcomes for the people that they work with. They're certainly not in it for the money. I figured that out a long time ago. You know, haven't been any of those in a long time. So people want good outcomes. They want the people that they work with. They want to save lives. They want to make improvements in their lives. They want them to do well. So in terms of collaboration, it's important that that we talk about community-based projects that are strengths-based. I will tell you, I've been in some bad discussions with researchers where it seemed like the objective was to find a deficit or a problem in our services. Well, that's not really quite what I'm hoping they're looking for. Because you can frame the same question, if you're a clinician, you know, you can frame the same question in a different way. What's wrong with you? Or, wow, you've had a lot of challenges in your life. You have some resiliency going on. I think programs tend to be resilient. So I'm looking for research that plays to our strengths as a provider and to the system that we work in, because I believe that most of us are doing the best that we can with what we have most days of the week. So I'm looking for research that acknowledges that and doesn't try and tell us everything that's going wrong.